Imagine a world where the two most powerful nations on Earth nations that spent decades viewing each other with suspicion, rivalry, and fear suddenly choose partnership over confrontation. No long build-up, no dramatic prelude. The story begins the moment you see the headline. The United States and China announce strategic alliance. The shock is immediate, but the consequences ripple far beyond the announcement itself. Because when these two giants stop competing and start shaping the world together, the global order doesn't just shift. It transforms. To understand what that world looks like, we must jump forward, past the ceremony, past the speeches, to the moment when the alliance begins to change how the planet works. The geopolitical landscape is the first to feel the tremors. For nearly a century, international politics has depended on balancing acts, blocks, counterblocks, the idea that power must be distributed so no one nation dominates. But the partnership between Washington and Beijing overrides the old logic. Together, they command the strongest militaries, the largest economies, and the most influential diplomatic networks. Suddenly, every regional conflict, from the South China Sea to the Middle East, begins to resolve through their shared lens. Smaller nations, once skilled at playing one side against the other, find the old game impossible. Negotiations shift from competing power corridors to a single, coordinated center. Peace becomes more achievable, but it is a peace built on terms both superpowers approve of. Stability rises, but so does dependence. Russia feels the shock deeper than anyone. For years, Moscow relied on the widening divide between China and the West. Now that divide closes. Its leverage evaporates almost overnight. European nations, relieved to see reduced U.S.-China tension, quietly worry about becoming irrelevant. India reassesses its entire foreign policy, realizing its balancing strategy no longer has a counterweight to lean on. Asia's strategic map rewrites itself with the center of gravity no longer in Tokyo, Seoul, or New Delhi, but in a Beijing-Washington axis that redefines what security even means. While geopolitics shifts at the level of borders and treaties, the global economy changes in ways ordinary people feel almost immediately. Tariffs vanish, sanctions dissolve, and supply chains reconnect like arteries that had been pinched shut for years. Prices stabilize. Markets surge. Manufacturers no longer fear sudden bans or blacklists. The world's two biggest consumers and producers stop fencing each other out and begin synchronizing their standards. A smartphone made in China can seamlessly integrate with an operating system designed in California. Chips, batteries, renewable energy components, once fragmented by national restrictions, flow across borders with an efficiency the world hasn't seen in decades. This economic integration births something even larger, a new global investment framework. With American capital and Chinese infrastructure expertise aligned, massive development projects sweep across Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. Railways, ports, green energy systems, high-speed internet projects that once needed years of political negotiation now receive fast-tracked approval because both Washington and Beijing are pushing the same direction. To developing nations, this partnership looks like a golden age of opportunity. Yet beneath the surface lies a new vulnerability. Dependence on a dual superpower economic system means stepping even deeper into their sphere of influence. Prosperity comes with strings. Technology, perhaps more than any sector, undergoes the most dramatic transformation. For years, the U.S. and China built separate digital universes, one centered on Silicon Valley, the other on Beijing's innovation ecosystem. When these two merge, a unified tech landscape begins to emerge, reshaping digital life for billions. Competing 5G standards collapse into a shared system. AI research, once split between two ideological camps, becomes a collaborative juggernaut funded by unmatched resources. Breakthroughs come faster, medical diagnostics powered by AI, trained on massive, combined datasets. Quantum computing projects accelerated by joint research hubs. Space exploration programs, pooling the strengths of NASA and the China National Space Administration. But the merging of technological ecosystems brings a new dilemma: governance. How do you regulate AI, data, surveillance, cybersecurity, or digital rights when the democratic and authoritarian philosophies behind them diverge so sharply? The alliance does not erase ideological differences. It forces them to coexist inside the same operating system. The result is a hybrid digital order that blends Silicon Valley's emphasis on openness and innovation with Beijing's strict, stability-driven approach to information control. Some societies welcome the new model as efficient and protective. Others fear it as a slow erosion of privacy and freedom. No one can fully escape it. Political systems around the world begin to reshape themselves under this new reality. Nations that once aligned clearly with either Washington or Beijing now face the same center of gravity. Advocacy groups, NGOs, and international organizations suddenly must negotiate their ideas through a joint framework defined by both superpowers. Issues like human rights, environmental policy, cybersecurity, intellectual property, and labor standards become subjects of synchronized pressure. Countries find it harder to resist when pressure comes from both sides. Reform accelerates in some places. Suppression deepens in others. The global political climate becomes more predictable, but less pluralistic. And then there is culture. That vast, messy, emotional terrain where nations stop being flags and begin being people. When China and the U.S. become allies, the cultural floodgates open. Hollywood invests in Chinese studios at unprecedented levels. Chinese directors collaborate with American writers on global blockbusters. Streaming platforms share catalogs. University exchanges explode. Millions of students flow both ways. Families connect, communities merge, and ideological stereotypes begin to soften. The average American no longer sees China only through headlines. The average Chinese citizen no longer sees America only through filtered narratives. A blended cultural zone takes shape, part cooperation, part influence campaign, part genuine curiosity. Yet even here, tension remains. Cultural influence becomes a negotiation of soft power, and both sides watch closely to ensure the other isn't pulling too many strings. Schools debate curriculum changes. Media platforms quietly adjust algorithms. Artists navigate new political sensitivities. Cultural cooperation becomes a balancing act between openness and self-preservation. As years pass, the alliance creates a world that is more stable, more prosperous, and more technologically advanced than any previous era. But it is also a world more tightly organized around two nations whose partnership defines everything from investment trends to security doctrines to online speech. The dream of peace becomes real, but it is a structured peace, a managed peace, a peace that flows from the top of the global system downward. And this brings us to the final question, the one history cannot answer for us. Would such an alliance make humanity stronger, or simply more controlled? Would innovation flourish, or would conformity rise? Would this be the beginning of global harmony or the quiet start of global dependency? If the U.S. and China ever truly became allies, the world would not fall into chaos. It would fall into alignment. Whether that alignment leads to a brighter future or a narrower one would depend on how much freedom survives in a world built by two hands instead of one. So if you saw that headline tomorrow, what would you feel? Relief? Fear? Hope? Because a U.S.-China alliance wouldn't just change politics. It would redraw the blueprint of the world, and every one of us would be living inside it.